In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use the user-defined function in a DAX query. So what we are trying to do is create a function that will allow us to return a specific value of a column by passing in the n position. And we are actually going to use the index function and wrap it around that particular function. So as you can see on the screen, I have some code. If I write a 1 here, we get the first year in the dates year column. In case if I sort that in the descending order, I will get the last value in the particular column. So what we want to do is wrap that inside a function, and then we are going to see how we can mix and match a user defined function in a DAX query and what are the challenges that we are going to face. So for that, we are going to write the define keyword that allows us to define different objects in a DAX query like column, table, measures, or a function. So we are going to first define a function which is going to be named as fx get value by position, and we are going to open and close the round bracket, which is the structure of a function in DAX. And we are going to pass in the first parameter named n, which is going to go directly inside the index function. And the data type of this function or parameter is going to be int64, and the type is going to be value because we are not going to evaluate that in a different filter context. We are just going to pass a constant value. Then we are going to specify another parameter which is going to be order by call, and this one is going to be any ref because we are going to pass in a reference to a column in the data model. And then this one is going to be expression because it can be actually evaluated in a different filter context as well. So next one is going to be the sort order that we're going to specify inside the index function, either the ascending, descending, or a integer number. So this one is going to be sort order, and let's write that any ref because we are going to pass in a reference to an object that is available inside DAX. So we are going to say expression. Finally, to return something, we are going to use the equal to and the go to symbol, and then we are going to write index n, and we are going to write order by, the order by call, and the sort order. So let's close that, and as you can see, we have actually skipped the second argument of the index function, which is actually the relation parameter. So when you skip the second argument, then what the engine does is it basically does an all selected of the columns that you specified inside the order by function. So in case if I pass in the dates here, then it will do an all selected inside the second argument. In case if I do an order by, let's say, dates year, dates month number, and dates date, then it will do an all selected of all those three columns. But in case if you try to do an order by different columns of different tables, then in that case you cannot actually skip that argument. You will have to provide a table inside the second argument. So let's try to run it. It will not do anything because we need the evaluate function, evaluate keyword, and then we also need a table function in which we are actually going to call that particular function. So we are going to write evaluate, and the function is summarize columns, which is also used by the Power BI desktop behind the scene to generate the visuals. So we are going to use the dates here to group by that particular code. And first let's try to print the sales amount column. So if I run that, you can see that we have 5 years and there is some sales amount for those years. But if I try to return that particular, let's say, first year or the last year in that particular column, let's see what is going to be returned. So we are going to create a column named first year, and then we are going to call this function fx, and in the first argument we are going to provide the 1 so that we get the first value in that column in the ascending order, and we are going to pass in the year column as well as the ascending. So if I run it, now you can see that it has printed 2020 in each cell of that particular column because 2020 is the first year in the dates table. And what we can also do is try to order that by the dates, the first year column. So I can say first year, sorry, not first year, actually dates year. So now I have actually ordered that particular result set in the ascending order, and then we can create another column inside the summarize column, which is going to return the last value in the dates year. So all we need to do is either descending, or in case if we know how many unique values are there in the dates year column, then you can also pass that here with the ascending clause. So let's say I write here something like 6, then I actually also need to rename this column. If I run it, I actually need to pass 7 to get 2026. But instead of doing that, we can actually sort that in the descending order and just pass in a 1. So now in the first year column, we get the first value, and in the last year column, we get the last value. So now if I try to inject that value inside into the filter context so that under the calculate we can evaluate the sales amount for that particular year, we are actually going to return blank for the first year and the last year because there is no row inside the sales table for those 2 years. So let's try to do that. And I'm going to say first year sales, and then we can write calculate sales amount, and then basically copy and paste this part of the code. And if I try to run it, it is going to return a blank in that column. And then we can do the same for the last year as well. And here I'm going to do a descending, and this one is going to be last. So if I run it, both columns are now actually returning a blank. So how can we actually return the sales amount of 2021 and 2025 instead of the first year and the last year in the dates table? Instead of that, we can actually try to summarize the sales table by the dates year column so that we only get those years in that list that actually have a row in the sales table. And for that, we are going to create a code that will summarize the sales table by the dates here. And what we can do is in the query itself, we can use the table keyword. So I'm going to create or use the table keyword, even though it says there is an error by showing the squiggly lines, red squiggly lines, it is still going to work. So the name of the table is going to be source table, and the code is going to be calculate table, summarize the sales table by the dates here, and then we are going to do an all selected dates. So in case if there is a filter on the year or different columns of the dates table, it is still respected and we only return those years that the user is actually interested in. So now we have created a virtual table or a query table that contains only one column, which is the dates year, but it only contains those values that participate in the sales table. So what we can do is, first of all, we need to update the definition of this particular function because this time we are actually writing the relation table, which is actually a customized code. So for that, what we can do is here we are going to write relation table, and the type is going to be table as well as expression. And then finally, in the index part of the code, we are going to write relation table. So now what we can do is in this code, we are going to evaluate, we are actually going to pass in that particular table as the parameter in that function. So I'm going to say source table and then the year as well as the source table here as well. So we can do the same thing for the second line as well. So I'm going to copy and paste it here. And for a moment, I'm going to comment this. And if I try to run it, let's see why we are getting an error. So we have source table here, source table year. It says that a single value for the column year in the source table cannot be identified. So actually I made a mistake. Here I actually do not need to pass in the column itself. I need to provide the table itself. So if I run it now, you can see that it now prints 2021 and 2025, not 2020 and 2026. So now that we have this value, we can actually try to evaluate the sales amount under this filter context. But you will see that it is not going to work. So we can uncomment that, and I will copy this and paste it here. And then we can copy this and paste it here. So hopefully it should work now. If I run it, you will see that it prints the sales amount, but it is not the sales amount of the first year for each row. You can see that it is actually returning the sales amount of that year only. The reason being, the source table, the value that you are returning by this function or from the source table doesn't have a connection with the sales table. So even though we are actually injecting that value in the filter context, that value cannot impact or filter the sales table because there is no relationship between these two tables. But the dates table can. So what we can do is we can try to treat that value as if this value, this year value was actually part of the dates table or the year column. And for that, what we are going to do is we are going to create a measure. So we are going to write measure, and let me just see the code on my different screen. And the name of this table is going to be source table sales first year. And we are going to first get that particular year that is visible in the filter context based on the position that we are going to specify. So I'm going to create a variable first year, and let's collapse this window. So the first year variable is going to be basically this part of the code. And then we can return calculate the sales amount, treat as this first year. So let's see why it is not available in the IntelliSense. So it should be available first year as the dates here. So we can close this. So we have created a query column that is only available for the duration of this query, and it actually uses the query table that we have created just before that, and it doesn't exist in the data model. So let's remove these ones, and what we can do is we can simply call this measure, and let's remove this as well. So if I run it, now you can see that this value is actually shown in each cell of that particular column. And similarly, we can actually create the measure for the last year as well. So let's outdone that. And this one is going to be sales last year, and ascending, it is going to be descending instead of ascending. So, and the name of the variable is going to be last year. So the red lines are basically because the IntelliSense may not have been updated in the recent version of Power BI Desktop. That's why it is thinking that it is not a valid DAX syntax. So what we can do is we can create another column which is going to be last year, and then we are going to return the sales last year. If I print this or run this, you can see that here we are returning the sales of 2021, and here we are returning the sales of 2025. So that's how you can actually mix and match the measure function table inside a single DAX query. And finally, what we can do is, to complete the example, we can actually try to return these rows that are actually returning a blank. And for that, we can simply create a query column. So what we are going to do is write column, and this column is going to sit inside the dates table virtually, not permanently. And this, the name of this column is going to be as sales. So basically what we need to do is check whether that particular date in the dates table has at least a single row or one row inside the sales table. And for that we are going to say is empty calculate table sales. And this column is actually going to return true or false. So we can inject that into the filter context inside the summarize column, so that it can filter the group by columns directly. So we are going to say that treat as true, sorry, the table constructor true, and then let's close that, and then we are going to treat that as the dates as sales. So if I close that, run it, now you can see that we have removed those rows from the sales column that were actually returning a blank. So that's how you can actually mix and match the user defined function, the measure, column, table keywords in single DAX query. And that was all for this video, and I will see you in the next one.